All right, so we have a number of delegations. They're all here with respect to Report 3, Plan Approval, Waverly West B School Site. So the first is Jeff Pratt, Landmark Planning and Design Incorporated. And I believe Jeff is with us already.
Yep.
All right, you have 10 minutes for your presentation and you can proceed.
Great. Thank you very much, and good morning to the Assiniboia Community Committee. Thank you for having us here today. We're here this morning to present about the proposed plan approval for the Waverly West Schools site. This is a big juncture and a long and winding road to get here, and we're very excited to be here today. As noted, I'm Jeff Pratt with Landmark Planning and Design, and if it's okay with you, I will share my screen. Which is on the last slide for some reason, but we'll get that up to the front. And I am I'm one part of a multidisciplinary team here today who's been working on this project. And when I get to the correct slide, I will speak a little bit about that. Our thought was that I would give a general presentation giving an overview of the proposed plans, and then the rest of the team members who are here today could answer any specific questions related to their particular components of the project instead of everyone all presenting for 10 minutes, if that's okay. So Pembina Trails School Division is ultimately the proponent of this project. Landmark Planning and Design has been doing the land use approvals. HTFC is the site plan, design, and landscape architects. LM Architecture is the secondary school architect. Prairie Architects is the elementary school architect. And More Transportation Consulting did a very thorough transportation engineering analysis and report related to this school site to make sure it's working in a that all traffic flow is addressed, et cetera, and pedestrian considerations are well accounted for. So we were here last month at the Assiniboia Community Committee to get approval for conditional use and some associated variances to build a new 2-story elementary school, which would be built for about 800 students and 94 staff, and a 3-story senior high school, which would have an occupant load of 1,200 students and 135 staff. And those were approved here at Assiniboia Community Committee last month. For a little bit of context as to where this site is, it rests within Qualico's Phase 1 development for the Waverly West Neighborhood B area. And there is a secondary plan for this development that does call for a school site in this general location. And here you see it shown south of the future Bison Drive extension to the west of a future collector street that would ultimately be an extension of Northtown Road in some way, shape, or form. It might have a different name, and north of Lee Boulevard area as well. So here's an overview of the site plan. The high school is proposed to be located at the north portion of the site, and the elementary school down towards the south here. There is a bus loop located between the two schools, which would allow for all school bus traffic to serve both schools. In the interim, until public transportation is established, the high school would have some buses going there. In the long term, it's thought that the elementary school would be the only site receiving school buses for a permanent basis. The site is designed to separate vehicular and non-vehicular traffic for safe movement of pedestrians, as well as safe movement of motorized vehicles. I'll speak to that in a couple slides. There's various outdoor play areas and landscaped areas. We'll go into a little more detail on that in this presentation. Traffic circulation of both motorized and non-motorized vehicles and people has been a fundamental consideration of this, and More Consulting's transportation study directly fed into the site plan. And we'll speak to that in a little bit as well. So in terms of the landscaping and planting, once again, a representative from HTFC is here if there's any very specific questions. But from a general summary to fit within a 10-minute presentation, all of the city's landscaping and planting requirements are met or exceeded, sometimes substantially. For instance, on the street edge landscaping, the requirement would be 26 trees, but 56 are provided. Shrubs would be 102, but 330 are provided. So there's in some cases, some pretty substantial overages in planting provision. This is the high school portion. And here is the elementary school portion of the site. Once again, meets or exceeds all requirements. There's also some interesting features put in, such as a rain garden. I believe the high school is going to have an area for the culinary arts program to grow things as well. In terms of the overall site layout and provision of parking, active transportation infrastructure, and vehicular flow on the site, as noted, Moore Transportation Consulting did a very detailed analysis for this project. I've been involved in several school approvals, and this is the first time I've seen this done. And they really dug into the details to make sure that a good amount, adequate amount of parking is provided that exceeds the zoning bylaw requirement. And they paid a lot of mind to how people and vehicles would move through the site and safely access it as well. So in terms of non-motorized traffic, for instance, on the left of your screen, you'll see a sort of macro level representation of existing and proposed active transportation trails. Green ones are existing, the dashed purple are proposed, the red dot is the school site. So that shows how it fits into the overall network of both what's existing in the Waverly West area and what would be provided in the Waverly West area B development as for the secondary plan. And on the right, you see a more detailed representation of how active transportation trails will meet the school site itself. So you see in blue, it isn't detailed about how they are on the site, but how you access the site. There would be an active transportation trail that wraps around the perimeter along the Collector Road network and the future Bison extension, as well as several points where the site would be accessed, and an east-west corridor through just south of the elementary school as well. And here's a little more detail on site. So one of the key features of trying to ensure safety for everyone on the site is to have a separation of all the various school vehicular traffic. So the high school has a one-way in, one-way out circulation for drop-off and access. Same with the bus loop in the middle. And then the K-8 school has its own circulation as well around the parking areas. In terms of pedestrian movement, Moore Transportation established a walk shed. So in this particular example, it starts from the west of the site, but this could ultimately be flipped from the east as well. That basically you can walk the entire site in 5 minutes at the most. And in the central area where the two schools are, as well as where most drop-off areas are, it's actually a very efficient movement of pedestrians through the area. Parking and loading is always a big issue with school sites. And what the Moore Transportation Study did is they not only analyzed the city's zoning bylaw requirements, but they did a bit of a scan of other schools in the Pembina Trails School Division to see how much parking they provided, as well as an overview of the ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineers, parking requirements from the American context as well to help feed into their analysis. And ultimately what they recommended is that for the elementary school, the bylaw requirement would be 37 parking spaces and 4 bike spaces. And what is provided is 100 parking spaces and 156 bike parking spaces. And for the senior high school, the bylaw requirement would be 175 parking spaces and 18 biking spaces. And what's ultimately provided is 215 parking spaces and 192 bike spaces. So that really does speak to the idea of trying to encourage people to visit the site via bicycle and other active transportation modes, but also does provide a fact-based rationale for providing more than the zoning bylaw calls for. And the zoning requirements are also exceeded in this case as well. Ultimately, the elementary school provides 63 spaces more than the bylaw minimum, and the high school provides 40 parking spaces more than the bylaw minimum. Here are some renderings of the elementary school to help provide some context for what it would look like. As noted, it's a 2-story building, and this is how it would be situated on the site and give a sense of what it looks like. Once again, Prairie Architects are here if there's any very detailed questions about what it might look like. But this gives a sense of the aesthetics of the elementary school. And here for the high school as well, some 3D renderings of what it is proposed to look like. Once again, 3-story structure, built on the site with a variety of programming involved. The architects could speak to that in more detail. And ultimately, that's a sort of high-level summary of what's being proposed. As noted, the various design disciplines are here to speak in more detail if there are any questions. And maybe what I'll do as I wrap up and maybe go, if there's any questions that the committee has for me, I'll just roll up to the site plan as a start so we can reference it.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and we had it on our computers as well, which is a great way to be able to see the finer details. So thank you for providing that.
My pleasure.
I'm sure, I have a few questions, but I'll turn to my colleagues first. Councillor Gillingham, do you have any, or Councillor Lukes?
I have a couple, but I'll turn to Councillor Lukes first, because it's her area for sure.
Right.
If she has any.
Councillor Lukes, do you have any questions? You're on.
Well,
there you go.
Sure, I have a few questions. So what you're saying, Mr. Pratt, is no one else will be speaking if these questions are related to some other area. You'll have them speak, or you'll answer them.
Yeah, as long as the clerk is okay with that format, I think it would make sense if if you had a detailed question about the site plan or landscaping, I would defer to Monica, who is registered as a delegate, but maybe for everyone's time, we don't all have to give a 10-minute presentation.
Sure. Okay, so I don't know which diagram you want to pull up. I would appreciate if you could pull a diagram up. What we're doing is this is recorded, and I know residents are very interested in this. I've had folks send me some questions, so I'll be asking them. And, if we can point to the diagram, zoom in on it a bit, that would be great, okay? So one of the questions that I have is, if portables are required, where would they be on the elementary and high school sites?
Okay. Monica, are you able to speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So basically, the schools are built to a very large capacity. The high school, if Jeff goes to the east wing, actually has a square dashed in, which is the area for either a future addition or portables should they be required. Although I think that everyone's preference is an addition rather than portables. So we're trying to avoid portables in this situation. And then the elementary school.
Can you zoom in, Mr. Pratt, on that? Just zoom in for us so that we have a better view of it. Thank you.
Yeah, I will try here. I think I have full. Is that working for everyone?
Beautiful. Okay, perfect. Thanks.
So right. And can you see this hand cursor here?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so it's right.
So there's room for growth there should it become required. On the elementary school, south of the high school basketball courts, there's an area that could be used. But we have discussed for a very long time that portables are not something that is going to be desired in this area. And I can let Pembina Trail speak to that further and the capacity of the schools. So the intent is to try not to have portables.
Okay, no, I know that's always the intent, but you see differently. So that's great. I don't know if Pembina Trails, if Lisa wants to say anything to that at all on the record for the people, or maybe not.
Sorry, just clicking away on things, Councillor Roots. I don't really have much to add other than the high school in the design, in consultation with the province, we did contemplating having dedicated land, a footprint that could be an addition or portables. That it was the decision that we not contemplate that in the same dedicated way for the elementary school, and that there's a fallback plan, but not not the desire to give up current space in terms of the layout. And we've gone through lots of iterations to be able to add portables to the K-8 school.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Pratt, this is a question I don't know. I'm sure that the team looked at it. City transit. We've got rapid transit corridor down south. We've got high frequency transit. We've got a lot of transit happening, or more transit potentially. You know, it's great to look at all the parking and biking, but can we just talk transit? And maybe you could just tell us how you considered transit in this plan.
Sure. Well, transit generally in a new community will run on the collectors. So in the future, when bus service is provided to the area, it would come down this future collector here. And there are several spaces where a future bus stop could be provided.
Can you zoom in on that just to show us?
Sure. And I'm not sure, Stephen Chapman from Moore, if you want to chime in any more detail, but really there are these parking and loading spaces along the collector. And generally speaking, what we would find is a bus stop provided along one of these areas. I'm not sure offhand if Winnipeg Transit's preference is to have it be right before an intersection or right after. But that would be the general location where a bus stop would be provided. And I'll just give an opportunity, if there's more to say on that, for Stephen Chapman to chime in.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So just to add to Jeff's comments there, I think an important consideration in the design for both schools was to provide, starting my video here, to provide the ability for convenient pedestrian access across what's identified as Northtown Road. I believe it might be called Frontier Trail when it's built, where the bus loop connects to the location. So just considering the transit flow northbound and southbound, that we want it to be safe and convenient for those that use it to cross the street to access the bus or access the school from the bus stop.
So Mr. Pratt, just point to that. Is he speaking to that area there? So transit somewhere in that area there.
I would expect with the crosswalks and everything, that would be the most logical place to put it.
Okay. I have another question. I know we've got ample bike parking, but this question was asked of me on social media. And I think I know the answer, but I guess I'll direct it probably to Monica or to you, Jeff. Is there the possibility to put more bike racks in if the demand is there?
Yes, there's capacity to add bike racks should you require them. But as you've noted, Councillor Lukes, there is probably quadruple the normal number we would provide in a school here already.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think if the need arises for more, that's a great win for everyone. And
well, that's what we're going to be aiming for. One of the most walkable, bikeable neighborhoods. Okay, here's another question. Maybe I'll start with the child care facility, because this I want to get to the drop-offs and how that all works. But I had this question presented to me. We are under the understanding that every time the province builds a new school, it's legislated, royal assent, it's legislated that a child care facility be built with each school. Now, I don't see any child care facilities here. Maybe you could explain that and explain why there isn't any.
Sure. This is a very unique situation, and it's a very good question, and I will answer it to the best of my ability. But there is provision made for a future childcare facility. And really, there's future plans for a quite substantial recreation campus to the west of the school site.
Okay, just zoom in on that a little bit. Sorry, zoom in on the future child care center site.
Yeah. So right here.
Perfect.
And one of the unique things with what's happening on this site is that there's a future, very substantial recreation campus that at some point will be developed to the west here. And through prior agreement between the city of Winnipeg and the province of Manitoba, so like up at the sort of decision-making levels, far above where I float as a mere planning consultant, some decisions were made about various funding models for that. And basically, the childcare component needs to qualify for some funding, needs to be located on city-owned land, not land owned by the school division. So there's full provision made for childcare center to be provided holistically, kind of in an integrated manner between the schools and the recreation campus. And that's fully planned for on the site. A parcel was set aside for it, but it would need to be developed in concert with the recreation campus. And it's also worth noting there's a similar situation with a future vocational training building as well that would eventually be part of the high school. But once again, it needs to be located on city-owned property, just for some technicalities that are a little above my pay grade. But yeah, that's the sort of Coles Notes answer of it. But yeah, it's a unique project in that sense, for sure.
Okay, so just for the record, and I'm sure Councillor Gillingham will, when he asks questions, will speak to this too. So for the record, the childcare facilities are not going to be built until the recreational complex is built, due to the province's funding model that they've set up for this, I guess is the best way to say it. I know I'll be getting calls on this, wondering why the childcare facilities aren't being constructed at the same time the schools are. And I think it'll be a good question for the MLA to answer. But the understanding that I have is due to the funding model that the province wants to use to fund the childcare facility and the vocational building, that these two facilities will be built in conjunction with the recreation campus. That's my understanding.
That is my understanding as well, yes.
Okay, and just for the record, the city of Winnipeg has put $30 million on the table and has passed it unanimously at council to move forward on the recreation complex. We've made a funding application to the federal government that has to go through the provincial government first. So we've asked the province and the city for funding for the recreation campus. And the province is tying the childcare center, and I think the vocational building also, to this funding. So whenever they decide to announce funding for the recreational campus, that will be the trigger for then the city to start moving forward on the detailed designs for the vocational and the childcare center. That's my understanding. So we're waiting for funding, or we're waiting for an announcement from the province and the federal government on funding before we can proceed even with plans for the childcare facility and the vocational building. So I just want this on the record to know that the city's not holding up the childcare facility. The city's not holding up the vocational center. We're waiting for funding from the province and the federal government so that we can build the recreation campus and then build childcare facility and the vocational building. That's my understanding. Mr. Pratt, is that yours?
I'll caveat that, that's my general understanding. I'm not privy to those, or privy or part of those higher level understanding or decisions, but that's my general understanding of the sense that the childcare center is not part of the architectural scope of this this project we're talking about right now, because it's supposed to be done in the future as part of this larger recreation campus.
Right. And the province, so my understanding is then the province is also seeking funding from the federal government and their own funding to build these two facilities, but we'll have the city build them for them. And they will be attached to the recreation facility. Okay, so now that we understand where the childcare center is going to be, I'd like you to go through the traffic flow for drop-offs, because as a parent, you drop your kids off at school, right? You drop them off at elementary school, and then you drop them off at the daycare. So let's talk about how that's going to work. With no childcare facility, they're not going to be dropping off kids to childcare. So just run through how they'll be dropping them off for the elementary school, and then run through the option of if they've got, baby and grade 3er, the traffic flow and the pedestrian and walkability aspect of it. As a parent, this is a big concern.
Okay, Monica, do you want to do that? I know you've explained this to us before. Would you like to do it?
I'm happy to do it.
Okay,
Stephen can chime in if there's anything he'd like to add. As Jeff noted in his introduction, we have very carefully planned the circulation for this campus because it contains a lot of people on a daily basis. So let's start with how buses for both schools are going to be dropping off. There's the central intersection we were discussing related to the bus stop. That is also a signalized intersection where buses will be turning left into a dedicated bus loop. So the sort of dog leg loop you see in the middle of the plan is the dedicated bus loop only for school buses. So school buses for the high school park up in the loop portion closest to the high school entry areas. And then on the south side of the loop, there's room for 8 school buses to line up and deliver children very directly onto a safe sidewalk, directly into a main entry, away from the street. So that's how buses drop off. And the intent is that over time, a lot of the children coming to this school will come by bus. For those who are choosing to drop their children off, and Councillor Lukes has had this experience firsthand in South Point, we have very carefully thought about how especially elementary school children will be dropped off. So the elementary school includes a dedicated left turn lane off of Frontier Drive, Frontier Trail, sorry, that's the street that keeps getting renamed, and then has room for up to 30 drop-off stalls around the entire outside loop of the pickup drop-off area. So parents can queue, and if they miss their spot or if there isn't a spot, they can come around again and pull in a very safe manner. Staff parking is tucked inside this large loop with only one entry in and out on the west side in order to prevent parent cut-throughs and additional congestion and circulation inside the parking lot. So we very clearly kind of tried to define the way that the pickup drop-off works. That pickup drop-off in off hours can work as, soccer drop-off to the west if it becomes a community amenity. It can also act as additional parking for large event days. To the north for the high school, we have the same situation. We have a left turn in, or obviously a right turn in if you're coming from the north, into a dedicated driving lane for high school. At the high school, we anticipate more students will be driving themselves to school, or at least dropping themselves off. So if you go straight down to the west and you come close to the north entry to the high school, that loop that's created, it provides ample drop-off for high school students very close to the north entry to the high school. Immediately within that loop, we have dedicated staff and short-term visitor parking, including accessible parking stalls. And then to the north of that, we have a secondary cell of parking, which is more staff parking and designated or purchased student parking. The parking lot from Bison by a large landscape berm and vegetation, so you're not looking at a massive parking lot off of the new roadway planned on that end of the site. Once you get off of that, and if you have a young child, as Councillor Lukes has answered or asked, the idea is that the drop-off for the daycare or childcare center will happen within the recreation site. So you can see this little half circle. That is the last version.
Sorry, could you zoom in on Jeff so we could see the pathways and such with the elementary school? Perfect. Sorry, Monica.
No problem. So, the last conceptual plan we saw had a driveway coming very close to this edge. So that's what that curved line is. It's just a drop-off route, providing drop-off for the childcare very close to the childcare entry. The idea is, in the math that we have done, is that there's less than a minute walk for children between that drop-off and the west end of the elementary school, which has an accessible entry and good visibility. So parents coming to drop off to age groups, including childcare and an elementary school student, would actually be able to let their child out or walk their child to the future childcare center and watch their older child walk to the elementary school, or if they choose to, walk them all the way there themselves without having to go around and drop off at 2 locations.
I would just add, this is Lindsay Oster from Prairie Architects. I would just add to Monica's description as well that there is a before and after school childcare program integrated with the K-8 school. And so drop off specifically to that function. Yeah, maybe Jeff can just zoom over to it. So it's directly adjacent to the play yard at the south and east section there. So when you come into the main elementary school, it's just to the south of that by the gymnasium. So the parent drop-off loop that's used for the K-8 school would also serve as that before and after childcare drop-off loop.
What is the capacity for the before and after built for?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, but I think there's 2 separate rooms, and I think we are about 48 or 36 children.
The number is 45, but
45.
it depends on the layout and then early learning and childhood getting in there and approving that number. But the number is 45 currently. Oh, and I'm moving my mouse and you can't see it. So yeah.
Jeff, it's the little white block that has some text on it next to the word elementary school inside. That's it.
There you go.
Okay, so Jeff, could you zoom out again? Thank you, Monica, for that description. And now I would like to just talk to have the architects speak to, you know, how they've envisioned this facility being attached to, I know you don't have the plans for the rec campus, but how you envision this facility being attached, because, you know, I see you've got the drop off there, but that's where I envision the rec campus going. I mean, I'm sure that all of that can change because it's not built, but I guess to the architects, you know, where do you envision an attachment in your design to a recreation campus? I guess it would be the high school architect is.
Yes. Yeah. Can everyone hear me? Good morning. It's John Trenholm with LM Architectural Group. So basically we've positioned the high school and laid out the specific planning to respond to some early conceptual drawings that we've seen with regards to the future recreation site. So Jeff, if you are able to zoom in a little bit on kind of that part of the high school plan, and you can faintly see that the circulation for the high school is noted in a light blue. And so you can see that there is, a connecting public corridor that leads out to the west, which would provide for a direct connection into a future, the future recreation building. And also we have directly below where Jeff is pointing, we have the main gymnasium of the high school. So that will sort of sit directly adjacent to that future recreation campus. We also have public amenities such as public washrooms directly off that corridor. And then the, I guess part of the study is the sort of the accommodation of the future vocational building, which I just want to make one minor correction that that piece of the project has been fully designed. It's tied to a funding model that is part of a future phase of the project. So it's fully designed. It's just tied to a future funding model. So But there is, as you can see with the way the circulation is laid out, the primary circulation pass within the high school, it provides direct connection in to the future rec center on the west side of the high school.
Okay, so I don't have any more questions. What I would like to say though is I really want to thank the Public School Finance Board for all the effort that they have extended and the consideration they've extended to myself and to the city, but in particular to myself. I think it was over a year ago. We met for the first time in January, and our visions really weren't aligned, but they are now. And, we've had some very frank and forward conversations, and I really appreciate the listening to my concerns. To Pembina Trail School Division, prior to being elected, I worked for many years on active and safe routes to school, and though not an engineer, had learned an incredible amount of information about transporting kids back and forth to school. Throughout this entire process, through Jeff, through Monica, the many conversations we had, I can't thank you enough for listening to me, for giving me the time and allowing my input. I do feel it's added value to all of this, and I really thank you for that. The transportation report from Stephen Chapman and Moore Consulting, 48 pages of study, 48 pages, and I encourage everyone to read it. Transportation to and from a school, let alone two schools connected to a super recreation center, is incredibly important. Years and years of people's knowledge have been poured into this. I don't feel it could be better. I think we've got a gold standard in what we've put into this design. Monica, your team, your work has been outstanding as always. We didn't get into the landscaping, but HTFC does outstanding work, and we've nitpicked over trees and talked about placement. And again, I can't thank you enough for the time you've provided me to have input on this, and the city staff. And to the architects, Kyle's not there. I worked with Kyle a lot. To the architects, Rebecca, amazing work. It's incredible what you've pulled together here. I see Brian Ward's on the line. He still takes my calls. Thank you so much, Mr. Ward. Much appreciated. In winding up, I just think this is an outstanding plan. I really can't fathom how it could be any better. Pembina Trails, the Public Finance Board has really invested in the landscaping, the active transportation, the schools, and now we just want to get the shovels in the ground. So that's all for my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lukes. We'll move to Councillor Gillingham, who had noted that he had a couple of questions.
Thank you very much, and thank you all, yes, for your presentation, and obviously Councillor Lukes for the hard and active work on this file. Really exciting and a very much needed development of the two schools and daycares, and eventually the recreation complex. I'll just concur with one comment with Councillor Lukes regarding really the matter of the funding of the recreation complex, which also includes ultimately the daycare, the vocational school eventually. The city basically has done all that we can do at this point, and the ball is in the provincial and federal government's court collectively, and so we await response from them, and really do need to see the funding as part of the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program funding. We've made application, and we really do need to see that funding approved as soon as possible. So we await that. My questions are related primarily to the traffic and pedestrian study. And full disclosure or confession, I have not read the entire Moore Consulting report, but maybe I'll just ask a couple of questions, and I think these folks can probably provide answers. It's really related to that kind of future collector street, whatever it may be called eventually. And I'm just wondering a couple things. the amount, could you just refresh us again? If there's potentially 2,000, if you kind of full build out, 2,000 people on that site or more, parents dropping kids off, staff coming and going, a few buses coming and going per day, and high school students, many of whom will no doubt be, driving or wanting to drive. I should say excellent work on the trails and the idea of promoting active transportation, walking and cycling. That's fantastic. Hopefully there can be a whole change there. And I know Councillor Lukes is working hard to encourage, when that site is up and running, a lot of cycling activity. However, on that street, on that Collector Street, future Collector Street, I guess how much space is given for those turning lanes to accommodate the queuing up of vehicles dropping off kids on the site? Because I know there's two locations. I know there's the high school location, there's the elementary school location, but just kind of remind us of what's going on that street to accommodate what could be a lot of cars and vehicles backed up.
So it's Stephen here again from Moore. One of the components of the study was to actually consider those specific requirements for left turn storage lanes on North Town Road, and also how the street itself would function at the crossing where the bus loop comes out, and then also with the future activity at Bison Drive. So the values there, the storage lane lengths, they're very small on the, actually they're not shown on this particular plan, but they are in our study. So where there's 40 or 50 meters indicated for storage, those are based on actual projections of vehicle demand for the high school. And where there's, potentially a left turn lane and then another left turn lane for Bison Drive to follow, we also worked with information about the neighborhood in general to ensure that we didn't have issues with left turn demand overlapping one intersection to the other. So to the extent possible, we've considered the projected volumes, not only for the schools, but for the neighborhood in general in coming up with this plan, spacing the median openings where they are proposed, and accommodating an appropriate length for left turn storage for the schools and for the other elements of the neighborhood.
Thank you. Inevitably, across the city where there are schools and streets adjacent, there are issues that pop up related to the speed of traffic. What is being done or contemplated now? This is not particularly your work, but more so probably in consultation with the city's work related to that future Collector Street. Has there been talk about with the city related to the design of that Collector Street to design it in such a way that would mitigate speed concerns?
I can provide a couple of comments on that as well. So again, on the west side of the street, adjacent to the school, you'll note in a plan that there are four curb extensions or bump outs. This is intended to narrow the width of the road, in areas where there is curbside parking, to physically reinforce the fact that this is not a high-speed arterial facility, that this is a neighborhood collector. So those are intentional as devices or design approaches to reduce the operating speed of traffic. And at the bus location there a lot of the pedestrian crossings that are proposed within the school are raised pedestrian crossings to show priority for pedestrians over vehicular traffic at those locations. The exact design of the intersection at the bus loop there hasn't been determined, but there may be an opportunity there to incorporate some of those ideas as well into the design to provide a reinforcement that this is not a high-speed facility. So to the extent possible with the design, we are trying to reinforce that lower speed operation and not rely necessarily strictly on signs or other measures to have lower vehicle speeds.
Okay,
If I could just butt in, Councillor Gillingham, if I could just jump in here for a minute. There's an awful lot of discussion going on exactly about this topic with the Public Works Department now. I don't know if Mr. Patman's on the line, but we've talked about raised crosswalks exactly, you know, like Mr. Chapman has said. But rest assured, this street is, the desire is to design it so it's not a speedway, right? And many conversations are ongoing. It's not part of the school plan approval, but it has to be considered into it. And rest assured, they certainly are considering things.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, appreciate that, Councillor. And Mr. Chapman, your comments related to that intersection of what features may be possible to make it a bit different and really, really safe leads to my next question. You've answered it basically. I was going to ask, you know, what kind of facility could be built there rather than the quote unquote traditional intersection where you've got left turns all over the place? Is there a way to, design it kind of in such a way that it's different and it would, you know, mitigate traffic collisions and pedestrian, you know, concerns? So you've answered that question. That's good. Appreciate that. Just thinking of three other questions. The area around, you know, yet has still to be built up as far as residential development, but I guess what thought is given to the impact of vehicles parking on streets in the neighborhood in due course? Or is that something the Public Works and the developer of the other areas would be working on? Because inevitably, if there's, you know, if students, let's say high school students, have access to vehicles and they're going to drive the vehicle, but there's no parking available on the site in the parking lot, they'll find the closest street, park the car, leave it there all day, or it could be a teacher, it could be, or anyone visiting the school, and be kind of walking to the school, and you know, you're going to get may get complaints in the neighborhood. Is that possibility been given thought? I'm sure Councillor Lukes has been thinking about that, but I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion related to that.
I can provide a bit of commentary specific to the, you know, Northtown Road, Frontier Trail, Collector Street. So there was specific discussions where those bump outs are located on the west side that identify like those, the sort of start and end of those bump out areas identify on-street locations where parking is envisioned and is compatible with the operation of traffic on that street. There's also an area that's been identified on the east side of the street closer to Bison Drive that specifically we would not envision parking because of the traffic operations at the Bison Drive and Collector Street intersection. But beyond that, it wasn't, we sort of looked at the scope adjacent to the site, not further afield within the neighborhood, and we didn't discuss regulations within the neighborhood as a part of our study.
Okay, and I'm confident Councillor Lukes will be, she's attentive to that. I know already. So, and what the future may be there. Two other final questions related again to that Northtown Road. I'm just thinking just south of the site. Yeah, thank you. Right where your cursor is. There seems to be, I think it's Albright Road on the map or something like that. I guess, what will U-turns be prohibited? I'm just, you know, there's a lot of vehicles coming in and out of that site. If they come out of the drop off, head south and need to get north, will they be U-turning and plugging the whole thing up, or will U-turns not be permitted until they have to go further south, or just how does that work?
So again, I'll start. Brian Ward may have more to add, but I think the key component here for the returning to the north movement is that there is a roundabout proposed just south of the school site. So okay. There is the possibility, if you know some undesirable movements crop up in terms of U-turns, that if they are restricted, there is a very convenient and appropriate location for those movements to move to, just south of the school location. Okay,
that's good. Thank you. I appreciate you pointing that out. I had not. I had missed that in reviewing the documents. I missed that roundabout, so that's helpful.
I tried to draw it in there. Hopefully it's showing up for everyone.
Yep. Final question is related to snow storage on the site. There are a lot of buildings parking facilities, soccer, football fields. The site is, there's a lot of items on the site, facilities on the site, which is great. But snow storage, what I know there's a requirement to provide adequate snow storage, but just wondering how you've accomplished that.
Yeah, so if Jeff can zoom in right to the blue square to the west of where he's just drawn the square, that blue area is actually a designated snow storage area for those two parking lots and the roadways. There's designated snow storage inside the middle of the bus loop. That's the reason that's a rain garden, is because it's actually designed to collect and absorb all the snow from that zone. And then for the elementary school, the snow is being pushed all the way to the west side along that tree line you see, which also acts as the snow storage buffer. And drainage infrastructure has been placed in each of those to collect the water in the spring and get it away as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your questions. Great presentation, a lot of wonderful detail. And you know, as I sit back and listen to this and look through the documents, it really was, to me, a great example of what can be achieved when different levels of government and different levels of the public service and the private sector work in harmony on a project. And it's very nice to see this come to this point here. And like Councillor Lukes, I can't wait to see shovels in the ground. The questions that my colleagues have answered or asked have all covered off most of mine. Councillor Gillingham spoke about the traffic concerns, and I have several of those myself, but I'll leave those because I believe you've provided enough detail on that at this time. I'll throw in the fact that I note there didn't seem to be any controlled crosswalks identified, and I also want to add that I think having curbside parking in front of any schools now is something that we really need to reevaluate going forward. We certainly could find maybe a better way to address that and take care of the traffic in front of our schools. But job well done, Councillor Lukes. I know you've put a lot of time into this, and I commend you for that, and also all the others. This is going to be a wonderful, wonderful campus. Councillor Lukes has another question.
I just, thanks. I just wanted to just have someone comment just on the intersection, seeing as we're talking about outside the plan, just comment on Bison and whatever the road is called, whatever you're going to call it. Let's call it Northtown Road. Just if you could just provide detail, is that a roundabout or is that signalized intersection, or has that even been decided yet?
This is Jeff here. My understanding is, based on the most up-to-date information, is that it's a signalized intersection. I don't know, Brian, if you have any more up-to-date info from your discussions with Public Works on sort of the development area as a whole, but I do believe it was initially considered as a roundabout, but then Public Works indicated they'd like to see it signalized.
Hi, Jeff. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I guess that's a detail that would be confirmed sort of through the development agreement and the detailed design of the road network in accordance with the conditions of the subdivision approval that I think require that it is a controlled intersection. So it would be controlled in some way, certainly. And the typical example would be signalized. Roundabouts might or might not meet that definition depending on the design proposed and approved by the city.
Okay, and I guess the question that everyone wants to know is, when does this start? What's the next step?
It's a great question. That's very difficult to answer. Hopefully this year is our hope for servicing in the area. There are still approval processes that have to be put in place and approvals that have to be provided by the city for servicing, and some final steps that have to be accomplished. And so we're working to try to do that so that we can make sure everyone can stay on track. But that's the goal.
Okay, so just to confirm, Mr. Ward, you are representing Qualico.
Yeah, I didn't, sorry, I guess, yeah. Brian Ward, for the record, with Qualico Communities. We're the developer, registered as a delegation as the owner, just to be here if anything came up.
So
related to
you're saying the servicing, like sewer, water, pipes have to go in. There's got to be road access that needs to be put in, and that's all being worked on. There's final registration of land titles and things. So you're thinking in the big picture that by the time all this stuff gets done, there will be some servicing construction this year, like roads and pipes and things.
That's our hope, certainly. Yeah.
And from the school side of things now, with assuming that plan approval is granted today, that allows the architects and the project managers on the school side to really get working, trying to gear up for the permitting process. And there's opportunities for school works to work in conjunction with Qualico's servicing. So if this is approved today, they'll be able to go ahead as much as they can as well.
And I guess this is a question for, I don't know if it's for Ms. Bowles or who it's for. Has the RFP gone out for the schools yet to get someone to build them, or where's that at?
It has not gone out yet. There's still some things that need to fall into place related to the land acquisition and some of the other things that Mr. Ward was talking about. But our documents are pretty much tender ready at this point.
And just to recap, how long does it take to build an elementary and a high school and all of this great stuff?
Our architects can speak to that again. So I don't know if John or Lindsay wants to start at K-8, and then John.
Hi. So for the K-8, as has been mentioned, a lot of balls in the air and approvals that need to happen in order to facilitate it. But we are ready for tender to be issued right away. And assuming that construction can start this spring, it would allow for the school to be open for the 2022 school year, so September 2022.
So if construction doesn't start till fall on the school itself, then that gets bumped back to further to 2022.
I would suspect as much, and then it really becomes a decision of the school division as to when is the appropriate time to start a new school year. If it's, for a K-8, if it makes sense to start, mid-semester January start, or something else entirely. So Lisa could probably speak to that.
And the high school, there's John.
Yes, the high school, obviously the time period is a little bit longer than the K-8 because of the scale of the project. Assuming it can go out this spring as sort of the initial plan was, we were targeting a January 2023 opening, but obviously that is again tied to approvals and things proceeding. So.
Okay, well, we'll be approving everything that you put forward, because we want this to happen and we want it to happen sooner than later. So again, thank you very, very much, everyone. I'm really pleased with where we're at today.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and the rest of the committee and the whole project team. It's been a great process.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Best of luck, Madam Clerk.
It is time to start the public hearing. If the committee would like, we can go up to 10:59 with the regular agenda, but it does have to be started at 10:59. And I see there is an individual waiting for the hearing in the waiting room. But if the committee would like to consider this plan approval now, they certainly can.
Yeah, Councillor Lukes had requested of Councillor Gillingham and myself to consider this item right now, and Councillor Gillingham and I both agree that that's acceptable. So maybe Councillor Lukes, you would like to move a motion?
Sure. I would like to move the recommendation from the Urban Planning Division for approval of the submitted site plans for the Waverly West B school sites.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Hearing none. That is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.